Welcome. How's everybody doing? David Griscom here with this week's Griscom stream. I'm coming to you live from Austin, Texas, and we are we're up on Twitch and YouTube. So howdy to everybody in the chat. A little bit more casual stream. I appreciate everybody being flexible this week. Ida's really hit some members of my family hard, and I've been sort of keeping them here until electricity got back to New Orleans. But thankfully everybody is on their way home safe and sound. But I was not able to do the stream on Tuesday because of it, so I appreciate everybody being patient. And we're doing it this week on Thursday, day after the main show. And if you haven't checked that out, I definitely highly suggest it. We talked with Brian Muir, who has been reporting on the ground in Brasilia. For people who aren't familiar, there's been these really massive right-wing protests against the rule of law and democracy in Brazil. It's not like the Supreme Court has really, in Brazil, has really been a force for left-wing values and pro-democracy. I mean, this is the same organization that jailed Lula on bogus charges. But Bolsonaro is already about a year out, is already running scared from Lula, and has been sort of implying that the upcoming election will be fraudulent. Very, very similar to what Trump was doing here in the U.S. But anyways, there was a huge protest down there, and we talked with Brian Muir for a good while yesterday, sort of being able to understand what things we could laugh at and what things we need to take very, very seriously. But yeah, I appreciate everybody. We got some fun stuff coming up. I got some James Lindsay, everyone's favorite self-proclaimed expert on both Marxism, critical theory, and now critical race theory. I have a quick debunk of some of his most recent kind of like Twitter meltdowns. Very, very strange guy, I have to say. And we'll also watch some vintage footage of his act skills in just a minute. But again, for folks who are just joining, feel free to jump in with questions. I will be talking also about the unemployment benefit, expiration that happened on Monday, which is one of the more despicable things that we've seen in a while. But yeah, let's get started. Oh, actually, one more thing to announce. This Sunday, Matt and I are going to be doing a deep dive into the Battle of Blair Mountain. I'm really looking forward to that conversation. So to get that, access to that extra bonus Sunday episode, join us at patreon.com/leftreckoning. But yeah, I mean, maybe we can start here with some of this unemployment stories, because I'm sure most people have been hearing a lot about this. It's obviously is extremely devastating, especially if you have been personally affected by it. I know people who have been living in the 22 states that eradicated unemployment benefits earlier. We've already seen how this kind of system doesn't really work for everyday working people. There's been some really horrifying videos that we've been seeing in Michigan where young people are basically getting bills for like $9,000 from the state, demanding that they pay back the unemployment benefits that they were receiving when they couldn't work last year due to the pandemic. Hopefully those things will be corrected in the near future, but it just sort of shows the kind of precarious situation that most working people in this country are in, compared to business owners and the wealthy and the elite, right? I mean, the people who were able to get incredible loans from the U.S. government during this pandemic, businesses through PPP, they got all those forgiven. Meanwhile, hairdressers, out of work students, restaurant employees, etc., are getting threatening letters from the state demanding that they pay back their unemployment benefits because they might have been given to them in error, right? It's just absolutely ridiculous, on top of the fact that these unemployment benefits should have been made permanent. And there's a reason that Biden and his crew haven't really stood up for workers on this issue. Let me pull this up. Matt Brunegg had a really good piece earlier this week on the kind of fallout from the unemployment benefits. Let me see if I can pull it up for you all. Damn it. All right. Hold up. Streamlabs is just so terrible on Mac. I have to move it over here. Sorry. It's from Matt Brunig. 35 million Americans are losing unemployment income today. And I think that the way that Matt Brunig does this is really smart and worthwhile, because the way that he presents this is we learned that 9.2 million people are currently receiving benefits from either the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation program or the pandemic unemployment assistance program, right? And what he ends up doing from that is making this point that because so many households, the average household size in the United States is around 3.8 members. That means around 35 million people are going to be affected by this program, right? So not all of them directly in the sense that they themselves aren't getting this benefit anymore, but it's going to affect households all across the country, people who rely on one another to basically to contribute to their family, right? And this is the big point about the unemployment benefits sort of evaporating, is that one, yes, certainly this is trying to take money out of people's pocket, right? We know the story. They're trying to get people to come back to work. This is what the right wing, this is what, small petty bourgeois people have been pushing into the media, right? Oh, we can't staff our business because people are making too much money at home. And we know the refrain, right? It's like, well, if your wages are so low that unemployment benefits are a threat to them, then you probably should be raising your wages. But it goes much deeper than this, right? So 35 million people, that's around 10% of the population. And when we're talking about, the unemployment crisis, it goes much, much deeper than just, some people are having a little bit of extra money at home. There are 5.7 million fewer jobs than there were before the pandemic, which is something that I think people really, really aren't reckoning with. Is one, not only has there just been an experience of mass death in this society, a lot of businesses have shuttered for good. So despite the fact that they might be saying that there's around 10 million jobs available to people, we are still in a shortage compared to where we were before the pandemic, right? So what is happening right now is they're trying to use unemployment and basically taking away unemployment to try to force people to go back, not just to the jobs that they had before, but more often than not, to worse positions, lower paying positions, harder positions. And you're forcing people to go into, more and more dire situations and jobs that they shouldn't accept. But again, it goes much, much, much deeper than this. One, this is bad policy, right? It's bad policy in the sense that working people are much better with their money than rich people. And what I mean by that is that working people, when they have extra money in their pocket, they use that. They use that to buy repairs on their car. They use that to buy groceries, tacos, etc. And when you take that money away from people, you're going to be losing a lot of consumers in your community, right? So it's bad policy on that, and we understand, why they're using it in the sense of like trying to keep wages down. But you got to understand that not only does this policy hurt workers directly by forcing them into these difficult and unnecessary situations, it hurts the economy because, one, we're losing all of this spending. And on top of it, the real reason that these benefits are drying up, it's not about jumpstarting the economy. It's not about stopping government waste. It's about worker discipline, right? And it goes way beyond wages. It's about reigniting a system that benefits bosses, right? And again, it's wages, but it goes beyond wages, because what your boss really likes to do is, of course, pay you as little as possible. But when they have you on the shop floor, when they have you at work, try to force you, extract as much value from you as possible. And a really great way to do that is to have this threat of being unemployed over your head, right? So yes, the losing of the unemployment benefits is to, try to discipline the workers who are outside of the workforce right now, but it's also to try to make unemployment, the threat of losing your job, to be something that is absolutely frightening to you as an employee already, so that you will accept worse and worse working conditions, more and more invasions of your private and personal life, and basically just making you afraid that if you stand up, then you could lose your job, right? So yeah, the unemployment stuff, the evaporation of those programs is about trying to keep wages down. It is about trying to get those people to take lower paying jobs, right? But it's also to make it so that the working class in America is more disciplined and is more afraid of their bosses, right? And this is the kind of structural stuff that's going on beyond just like, oh, okay, well, how is this affecting wages? How is this affecting unemployment? Bosses would happily, if they were forced to choose, accept paying a little bit higher in hourly wages to workers, then they would accept a situation where unemployment is not as devastating, right? Where their workers are more and more bold because they're less and less afraid of what happens if they get fired and they lose their job, right? And that's why Biden is evaporating these things, because again, they play by different rules. They got their loans forgiven, and yeah, I mean, this is one of those moments where you have to be reminded, as Matt Leck and I always say, that Joe Biden in a lot of ways has become this kind of press conference press release president, where he says one thing, people in liberal media get really excited about how Joe Biden is some kind of new creature who's sort of opening up the door into a new kind of politics. But when you really pay attention and you see what he's doing on a structural level, he's making sure that austerity returns when it comes to unemployment, and that bosses across the country get what they want here, which is a more and more disciplined labor force. Well, welcome. Well, we got some folks who just joined up over here. Welcome to this week's Griscom stream. We got some fun stuff coming. I got some James Lindsay coming for all of y'all in a little bit. I had a little dust up with him yesterday, and I want to sort of expose his understanding of Marxism for a second. But before we get there, I want to make sure that I'm acknowledging everybody. I'm taking questions from the chat, so feel free on both YouTube and on Twitch to jump in and ask questions. I think I missed one coming up on our YouTube chat from Jonathan Scott, who says, will you guys be covering the Battle of Anacostia Flats? We hadn't planned on it, but that sounds very interesting. I'd be happy to look into guests. If you have anybody, send them my way. Let me see. We got all of these folks coming in on the Twitch over here. Dan says the two different McDonald's owners in our town in Omaha are feuding. One advertises that they pay better at their franchises. We love that competition. Yeah, we want to see wages go up across the board. But remember, they're really trying to push the unemployment discipline too. It's not just about the reason that the unemployment benefits dried up is not just about trying to keep wages low. It's also making sure that labor is as disciplined as possible. And the thought that losing your job is not essentially a death sentence is something that's really, really threatening to the boss's power over all of us. Which is, one of those kind of like larger structural things that you're just not going to get from liberals. Speaking of liberals, let's look at James Lindsay for a second, and then I'll take some questions from the chat. How does that sound? Because this James Lindsay thing really, really has been cracking me up. I'm sure everybody listening to this show right now is familiar with our friend Conceptual James. He's somebody who, I remember Michael and I had an opportunity to do a chat with him a couple weeks before Michael passed away, and we both looked at each other and we were saying, absolutely not. We don't want to be sharing a stage with somebody like this because he doesn't make good criticisms. He doesn't understand what he's talking about for the most part. And, there's a lot of money and there's going to be a lot of eyeballs to anybody who's getting worked up about critical race theory and things like that. But I'm sorry. This is one of those moments where they are just not sending their best and brightest. So let's go here. Let me share this with y'all. Because we had... this is him yesterday. Just give me one moment. We're having these issues on the Streamlabs for me. But this is James Lindsay yesterday. Is this going to work? Nope. Okay. This is James Lindsay yesterday. Basically talking to some poor soul who was asking for some help understanding what critical race theory. And, James Lindsay is somebody who is really not going to open any doors of understanding for you. He's also the kind of guy who gets a little pink in the cheeks acting like he's some kind of avenger for daddy. And he responds to somebody basically asking, for a middle ground approach or understanding of critical race theory. And James Lindsay, with the bravado of somebody typing on their iPhone, says, the objective opinion is that it's race Marxism, which is an incredible term, thus terrible. There's no middle ground with communists. So again, real tough guy, James Lindsay over here. And this is the thing I want to focus on for a second, because I love this shit so much. This is so wrong-headed here. And he basically is going to try to make this really, really base level comparison between critical race theory and Marxism here, right? Where he says the Marxist theory stages of history: primitive communism, slavery, estate feudalism, capitalism, socialism, dictatorship of the proletariat, communism, utopia. Amazing stuff right here. I mean, look, this is Wikipedia level kind of understanding. You're trying to give somebody a basic understanding of like the Marxist view of history. Okay, we can deal with it. I always love when they throw in things like dictatorship of the proletariat, like they figured this out. This is very dictatorship of the proletariat, something that's very explicit in both Marx and Lenin, right? They don't have some kind of secret here. But he says this is exactly like critical race theory, because in critical race theory, they have primitive equity, slavery, segregation and apartheid, colorblind equality, racial equity, dictatorship of the anti-racists, and racial justice, utopia. Now, let's just take a second and deal with this, right? I'm not going to sit here and get super worked up about his Marxist stages of history here, but I am going to get worked about the critical race theory stuff. Because look, I'm not a big fan of critical race theory personally. I think absolutely is something that should be taught. It's also one of those terminologies that I never know what anybody's talking about when they're talking about it. When they bring it up, because it means so many different things to different people. And James Lindsay is an expert at doing that. But this kind of conflation between critical race theory and Marxism is very, very funny to me, right? Because he basically is creating this list, and he's just substituting and throwing words on a piece of paper, right? There is no theory of history that comes from critical race theory that is sort of lining these kind of stages out like Marx does when talking about history. Why? Because critical race theory, again, this is not even a dig at it, but it's not something that comes out of a Marxist tradition that takes this kind of view of like historical materialism, right? That looks at society on at this level to have a theory of history. Critical race theory, deals with material relations in a very, very different way than Marxism, right? So when people like James Lindsay are doing this, he's literally just coming up with insane lists. So I'm going to put this up on the screen one more time for y'all, because I created my own list here in James Lindsay fashion that I wanted to share with y'all, and I think it says a lot about society. But let me just put this up one more time for y'all to see. So these are the Marxist stages of history, according to James Lindsay. And this is the critical race theory stages of history. Again, there is no text that he's working off of. He's just making shit up. And in the spirit of making shit up, I have a list right here too, because there is a very big problem in American society as well. And that is that a very dominant part of our culture has been infected with Marxism, and in fact it has been infected with Marxism for a very, very long time. And that force I'm talking about is college football. See, you have 6 stages of college football: primitive competition, organized competition, where you start to have schools playing against one another. Then they start to get a little bit more organized, and they add in the AP National Championship Trophy, where newspapers across the country vote for the best team. Then you have the NCAA Division I Football Bowl subdivision, and that dominates for a long time. And then we are now in the late stages of history, where we are facing the CFB, the college football playoff, the dictatorship of the SEC. And very soon, I'm hoping that we will have Utopia, which is the 12-team college football playoff, right? The thing is about James, what pisses me off about him is like any fucking person can do this shit, right? And you could do it with any subject matter if you have a little bit of creativity. And it's amazing to me how much his shit works with people. But that's enough for me for a little bit. Let me make sure that I'm not missing questions from the chat. That just got to me so much listening to James Lindsay go off like that. And actually, I can't forget though, because we have to look out for somebody like James, because while he might not be a master of critical race theory and Marxism, he is a master of the blade. And here he is celebrating an achievement for getting so many followers on Twitter. All right. That's enough of that for now. Let me get over to the chats and make sure that I'm getting these questions in. Let me get on to the YouTube first to start. So I have to say, I apologize. I have not been following the California stuff close enough to give you a good answer to any questions on that. I really wish I did, but it's been a little bit crazy. Hey Dave, since you name dropped CRT, I wonder, being from Argentina, when talking with people from the United States recently, do you consider a more critical study on American foreign policy and imperialist policies would be helpful there, for everyday folk to be more receptive to broad left policies or ideas? Absolutely. I think one of the best things that Hugo Chavez ever did was give Obama the book Open Veins of Latin America. That's something that we definitely need much, much more of. Let me see. Gris, this week on This Is Revolution, Luke Mayville snitched on you and told us how young you are. Yeah, I know. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's a good thing that people think I'm much older than I am. I'm in my late 20s. All right, let's see. We got some questions. We got Stanford fans in the chat here. Let me get it. We got a lot of. I mean, there's a lot of questions in here. At Left Reckoning, why would he attack an elevator like that? I mean, James Lindsay is an amazing guy. And he just I don't want to just spend too much time on him today. I want to answer some of y'all's questions, but the guy really is just extremely lame. I don't understand. Sometimes, look, on a kind of stupid bro level, I can understand why some of these right wingers can be attractive. To worked up teenagers, right? Oh, you're super tough and you don't take bullshit from all of these kind of nerdy leftists, right? But this guy's whole shtick is that he is the one true, he knows all of these theories better than the rest of us, right? And he doesn't really exude a kind of masculinity that that you would expect. And you go on his Twitter and it's goofy as shit. I mean, he spends a lot of time on here just conflating all different kinds of theories together, and just, weird behavior, I have to say. Anyway, that's enough of him. I'll go sort of nuts if I spend too much time going down that rabbit hole. I really try not to do it, but he does piss me off a lot. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, definitely check out Open Veins of Latin America if you have, if you haven't. If Marx were alive today, would he change something in his theory, and why or how? I mean, there's a lot of work that was undone. The big thing that Marx didn't do was produce a theory of the state, and that was going to be so he had Capital, and the great unfinished work that he was sort of collecting notes on was going to be a complete theory of the state. So if you want to read interesting Marxist theory that I think actually really develops that Marxism in a different direction, or at least expands on it in a way without being revisionist and reactionary, it's state theory, for sure. Kowalski, Kale, Brooks, and Griscom, top 30 under 30. I love it. Doctor, is Left Reckoning set up as a co-op? Not yet. Matt and I are working on that. It's a little bit of a process, but we were thinking eventually once we were able to, we would like to set this up as a co-op and maybe sort of, take people along the journey, show them what that process is like. But definitely, is on its way. Let me see. Yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun if y'all are interested in that. And also, since we have people here, Matt and I also are really working and trying to get some T-shirts and hats and things like that. And if you have any leads or know anything about a way to do that kind of like ethically and affordably for folks, feel free to email us at leftreckoning@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you because we have some really cool mock-up shirts and things like that. But I've been trying to find a way to do it that's not just like horrible waste and it's like sweatshop labor, obviously. Can we have a Left Reckoning bar crawl? Yeah, come to Austin anytime. The big thing is if Matt and I are trying to get Matt and I, once we get to 1,000, Matt's going to come to Austin and we're going to do a BBQ stream. So that's definitely something to look forward to. Tom from Yakubia, our man Tom, says, David, how are your brakes? I finally got my brakes fixed in the car. Thank you for asking. It was a lot more expensive than I expected. Reach out to Hassan Piker. It's an ethical merch shop setup. Sounds great. My big thing is I can't handle... yeah, that sounds great. I'll definitely look into it. Well, let's see, y'all. Grill streams, let's go. Yeah. I'm telling you, once we start getting to certain numbers too, the big hope is that Matt and I are going to be able to come, start, seeing a lot of different things because I'm going across the country, taking the show on the road a little bit more. Like I'd love to go out to Alabama, and hang out with the Valley Labor Report guys sometime and, and also be able to cover things on the ground. I think that's sort of the end goal of, Left Reckoning. Yeah, Jason Miles is definitely somebody to talk to too about merch. I've been meaning to. All right, well, let's see. I'm here. I'm happy to take some questions. We got a lot of folks in here, so I don't feel like any need to jump into things. What's your favorite meat / cut to grill? I'm a big. I like to do chuck roast. That's my secret move. It's poor man's brisket. You can smoke that up for 5-6 hours. It turns out super well, and it's not like $100. But anything, right? If you're a good grill master, you're gonna be able to cover a lot of different things. I know. I always think that maybe I just need to make the plunge and just become a full-time barbecue. Let's see, yo. Have I ever been on an airboat? No, I have not. If you had to recommend a book to read on modern Marxism, what would it be? I think a really great book that's very accessible is Grace Blakely's book on Marxism, or not on Marxism, Stolen, right? Which is on financialization, and that's the period of time that we are in. There's no doubt about it. And Grace Blakely does a really great job at sort of explaining why there is a tension with finance and workers' power, and also sort of trying to come up with ways to build our way out of it. I say it all the time on the stream, that if you are serious about taking power, one of the most important things that we need to be doing is coming up with plans to take control of finance, because that is where a lot of the power in American society and global society is right now. And that's something that working people definitely need to start building up concepts of how we're going to get there. I love, people, I love co-ops and stuff like that, but I'm sorry, we have to think very, very big about things, and controlling investment, controlling finance is one of the most critical fights that we have ahead of us. And anyways, Grace Blakely's book, Stolen, is a really great introduction to start thinking about finance seriously. What's a good book to read about state theory? I highly suggest reading any work by Leo Panitch. Any advice on starting a union? Not for any particular reason. I'm curious how you'd start if you worked at a privately owned, medium, large company. Well, the most important thing you need to do is to talk to your coworkers and see what their interests are. And then once you have enough people, then you can reach out to whatever union is sort of the union in your industry, and they will provide you with those resources. I'm not an organizer there, so I can't give you any more suggestions other than, be discreet, but, talk to people who are, on your level in the company, people who you trust, about exploring that option. And once you have a few people, you can start to build, exploratory committees. Yeah, without with no enhanced unemployment and no regular UI, what the hell are we going to do? Sorry if you answered this already. I mean, I talked about it a bit earlier in the stream, and it's one of those things where, like, strategy wise, as a movement, I mean, this is a tough situation. I think one of the most important things we can be doing right now, people in left media and just in general, is like reminding people how big of a fucking deal this is. It's sort of amazing to me. I mean, I know a lot of people who, you know, are in these worlds, like we've been seeing that these have been evaporating, but this is not something that is sort of dominating the news cycle in a way that even like the eviction moratorium, which was, you know, underreported at the time too when it was up to expire. But, you know, there were some big stories around that. We're not really seeing that right now except for social media, and we really need to be making that into a big deal because it's a very fundamental one. Who did you say to read for state theory? I missed while I was looking up Grace Blakely. Leo Panitch. Definitely check out Leo Panich's work. If you're really, I mean, Leo Panich is somebody that I think you can jump into. If you're somebody who reads a lot of this kind of stuff, the other big guys are Ralph Miliband and Nicholas Poulantzas, who is a Greek and French theorist. I read that Lenin was kind of arrogant about the lack of preparedness or education of the proletariat class consciousness. I don't know what you mean by that, but I will say that class consciousness is one of the most important things that we need to be building right now, and to do that, we need mass political education. I've done a lot of videos for Jacobin on that. You can check that out on Jacobin's YouTube page, Why Theory is for Everybody. But I also do it on this show as well, too. It's one of the more important things that we have on the American left right now. And you can see it because what's going on? We know we lose this kind of anchor through Bernie Sanders and the Bernie Sanders campaign, and now nobody knows what the fuck to do. And you're seeing people going all over the place. You know, half of the left, you know, sort of focusing on these like one quick trick to get socialism, right? If we could just get, you know, the squad to do some kind of procedural move that we'd have Medicare for all and things like that. Sorry, that ain't going to happen. But then, you know, there's the other side of the left who, you know, is critical of those folks. But they're not really putting up, you know, roadmaps either. I think the most important things that we can be doing is getting involved in your community, getting involved in a socialist organization in your community, and doing mass political education. Right? That's sort of where we're at. I know it's not the most glamorous thing, but that's sort of where we're at for sure. How would you convince, Trevor wants to know, how would you convince a Trump supporter to join the union? Well, I think doing that is actually a lot more simpler than you think, right? I mean, they're reminding people of what unions do. Unions are about building class power. And I think, you know, so much of American politics, why you have such a bizarre formations amongst working class people, are because we don't actually have an avenue that most people think of as a space for like class politics. What do I mean by that? I mean that like the union is like organized worker power on the shop floor. And what the next step from the union is to building, you know, class power, building a working class party, right? And that's the organization of the working class on the national level, on the political level. Right now, we have no class organizations on the national level on the political scene. You know, so people, they find whatever thing in their life, you know, draws them in their own incoherent politics to be either Republican or Democrat, right? You know, we can't really operate on that level. What we have to be doing is showing people, what does the union do for you? And what the union does for you is not just guarantee higher wages, better contracts, etc., but it is a place for you to be able to flex your muscle, right? It's something that you can use to express your power and to get what you want. And I think there's two sides of convincing people to join a union. The one side was like nuts and bolts, like, hey, we'll get more vacation time. Hey, you know, we get higher wages. But the second one, and the one that I'm seeing more and more young organizers who are leftists doing, and I think it's very encouraging, is reminding people, it's like, this is also like how we have power. Right, this is how we have power at the workplace, is by being in a union so that we can get the things that we want. And I think that is a really, really exciting thing, and something that you should be doing as well. I'm just reading through the questions. Any Canucks in the chat joined the Democratic Socialists of Canada? I had not heard that y'all have an organization up there. But also, what the fuck's going on in Canada? I think Matt and I need to have one of our friends maybe Luke Savage or somebody like that come up and explain it to us, because it seems like you're having a very strange election coming up. David, could you maybe create a list of your favorite books and post it online somewhere so people could refer to it? Yeah, sure. That sounds like a nice idea. And if people in the Patreon, if they want me to go back to doing the theory reading group that we were doing, right, where I'd put up a selection of like either excerpts from longer books or essays or things like that, I'd be happy to do it again. It was always hard to gauge how many people are reading those, but if people really are interested in that, I'm happy to do it because it was a lot of fun. Have Andre on, yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. He's a nice guy. I haven't interacted with him much personally, but he seems really, he's definitely really smart. What sparked your interest in philosophy? I was just a working class kid and was trying to understand what was going on around me. It seemed like everybody in my community was working really fucking hard and didn't have much. I liked thinking. I liked sort of exploring ideas, and I always liked history. So it sort of became, I don't know, it sort of fell into it, I guess. Thanks to Dr. Paxmore. That's a good idea, too. Unions can have Trump supporters too. No, they do. There's no doubt about it. But in Brazil, they support Bolsonaro. That's no good. Would an older workforce be less inclined to unionize because of a lack of time to accumulate benefits for retirement? I think that more and more people are afraid of not being able to retire. So it might actually make it, I don't know, feel a little bit more urgent. I really liked your think tank question. Matt and I do think tanks on the first week of the month for people who aren't patrons as a bonus episode where we take questions. I really liked your think tank answer about the social justice left. Reminds me of the conversation Michael was starting on openness and closeness. I appreciate that. And they also have good suggestions to all of us, which is eat your vegetables. Yeah, Matt and I answered a question basically about dealing with this kind of new social justice political formation. And I was saying that, it's important to be able to isolate different things, right? Because there's a version of it that's very much like they're using concepts of social justice, right? Which is about, building equity for folks. But they're using it in a way to sort of close the door and actually building class power. And that's extremely damaging, right? There's a kind of social justice politics that's, used by Chase Bank and Discover and Pepsi, right? And we need to start to oppose that because it's a very frightening thing. But we also need to make sure that we don't become poisoned into not being able to realize, obviously, that somebody who's coming out of like a very specific kind of online SJW community, more often than not, they do have a genuine desire to help folks. And I think being able to make those historical points to them, and the economic argument to them is really critical to making sure that we get free, right? And remind people that a lot of the reasons that these systems, racism, sexism, and homophobia were developed were to keep down certain parts of the population. And I don't know, it's like you always have to be able to expand these perspectives, because like Marxism, why I think it's a really important philosophy, and it's especially important for political action, is it really takes a whole view of society into account, right? Because like there are always going to be kind of bizarre contradictions in our own life and our interpersonal relationships with folks. And I think investigating those is really important. But for political movements, you have to take the larger historical and social formation perspective if you want to make change. All right, well, let's see. And thanks everybody for subscribing on Twitch. I think Matt and I are hoping to do some more of this in the future, and also pressure him a little bit to join to join us up on this. I live in an apartment in New York, so no smoker for me, but I did just throw a slab of ribs in the oven. Very nice. I used to smoke ribs on a little little balcony in Brooklyn. Very, very much illegal, but I wasn't going to let any Yankee stop me from enjoying some barbecue. Are cooperatives just the banking industry's way of financing labor organization to disincentivize unionizing? I'm not sure exactly what you mean. Do you mean like banking co-ops? A lot of these things, they come out of just general needs for folks, right? It's one thing, like Matt has a great tradition of this being, from the Midwest and North Dakota, where, they have these kind of publicly owned banks or cooperatives that just came out of need. Here in Texas, a lot of the electrical grids and public utilities were cooperatives as well, right? And that was just like meeting people's needs. So cooperatives can, be formed for a whole host of reasons. Man's conscious. Somebody's. Big question: Chinese or Indian food? That's tough. I might have to say Chinese, man. I really got like New York really blew my mind with Chinese food. That's the one thing I really really miss. David, are you still playing banjo? Yes, I am. Um, no, oh, you're saying Trevor in the Twitch chat is talking about cooperatives have to buy out their share or the entirety of the company in order to have leverage. Again, if you're talking about people who are working out of business and are transforming it over to a cooperative, I mean, you get more power on the other side of it. I don't think that cooperatives are sort of designed to like weaken unionizing. I mean, at a certain point too, I mean, eradicating the bosses is a pretty good expression of workers' power. But remember, there's a lot of different kinds of co-ops, right? Like a consumer co-op is different from a workers' co-op, right? And more often than not, if you see a co-op in your community, it's going to be a consumer co-op. And those are, interesting, but that's a very different kind of process than like working people owning their workplace. Um, will I play banjo for Left Reckoners at 1,500 patrons? Let's do it. Yeah, it sounds like fun. All right, y'all. Let me see if we got any more questions. I know. Remember, so Sunday we're going to be doing in-depth episode on the Battle of Blair Mountain. I'm really, really looking forward to that. Next week we're going to be joined by Darna. I apologize. I'll tweet it out later. I can't remember her last name off the top of my head, but she's a really incredible environmental reporter who's been doing some great work. She's gonna be joining us to talk about New Orleans and Entergy, along with building a just transition in Texas, which is something I'm really excited for as well. Yeah, what do I think of credit unions? I mean, it's a different kind of formation. It's like credit unions can be, very beneficial in the sense that, like, they can give people favorable rates, right? But I do think at like large scale kind of stuff is like we need to be taking public control of finance in general. So that's more my thought on it. Trevor wants to know, does Matt play an instrument? Matt was I don't want to speak for him, but I'm pretty sure Matt played a little bit of guitar when he was younger. And I don't know if he does too much anymore. I could see Matt like really, 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 really shredding the. What's your NBA team? We got to go Spurs, I think. What's a good starting point to get into Lenin? State and Revolution, I think, is a great place to go. I have a good Lenin reader, and if you don't have, it's not over here, but. The Marx reader, the Marx Engels reader, and the Lenin reader are two of the better things to just buy. I mean, they're like $20-25, and you'll get a lot of different texts that you can sort of jump into there. I very, very much am a big fan of that. Christoph Bruns did the intro to the show. Who's one of Matt's good friends. He has I'll put his info in the chat when I have a second. He's a really great musician as well. All right, someone was asking about idealism. I did a whole thing on idealism versus materialism actually 2 weeks ago. I suggest maybe going into that instead of me doing a spiel on it again. Because it's really important. I mean, materialism is a very different philosophy than idealism. I did a whole section on that and sort of used Sam Harris as an example of an idealist. So maybe that will be helpful for you as well. I'm glad you like the song. Yeah, people really have mixed feelings about it, but I think Christoph Brun has some great music, and we have like 4 or 5 other songs that he did that we try to throw in there from time to time. but it doesn't always fit as well as the kind of real table thumping intro that we've been using recently. All right, y'all. I think I'm gonna roll out, and I'll see y'all on next Tuesday. I think doing these in the afternoon is a little bit nice, so I might do this as well. So I'll do that next. You'll see me next Tuesday around maybe 1:30 again Central Time. Wednesday we're going to be doing an episode on New Orleans and what they're facing, along with building a just transition for oil and gas workers, unionized oil and gas workers, which I'm sorry is one of the most important things that we can also be doing on the climate change front. Right, is like getting union power involved in building an alternative. I'm looking forward to that, as well as Sunday for patrons. We're doing our deep dive into the Battle of Blair Mountain. It's going to be a lot of fun. Always feel free to reach out to the Left Reckoning show page or my Twitter, answer questions or concerns, things like that. And I will see y'all in a bit.